Hello, my name is Mudinda Mbebana. Welcome to the Chosen Generation. Many young professionals find themselves hamstrung by the financial expectations of their family, and they get frustrated because it seems like there's an anchor keeping them in a sea of poverty. So the question that thus follows is, should we pay black tax? Joining me today are a few guests who are going to help us unpack this issue a bit more. We have in our midst Advocate Boyce Mkhize, who will assist us with unpacking this issue. And we also have Khomotso Modise, who will share her ideas. She is a journalist by profession. We'd like to tell our viewers at home that you can be part of this conversation. All you need to do is use the hashtag TCG and let us know what you think. Perhaps you can even share your story. Let's start the conversation.
I would say it's not really the money that we owe our parents, but it's an appreciation. It's not really paying, like I said before. I feel like it's us giving back to our parents for the way they raised us. It's not a must, but I feel like it's an appreciation. We are showing how grateful we are.
All right, let's get right into the conversation. I think I'll start with you, Sister Khomotso. Maybe you can tell us your experience with regards to black tax. What's your story?
I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't have much of an experience. I think first we need to speak of black tax and define what it is. I think a lot of us are rather uncomfortable with the terms black and tax next to each other.
In fact, that's an oversight. You're
yes,
right.
Right. But from the understanding in public opinion, I'd imagine from what I've learned about black tax, I haven't experienced it personally, but by extension, because we exist in communities, in our homes, we exist. We're not in isolation. At church, we've got parents. People would call parents. People would call grandparents. And if we were to go by biblical definition of who your parents are, there would be an element of tax, so to speak, in order to assist, support, to help wherever we can. So that's as far as my experience of black tax goes. Okay,
that's interesting. I like what you are saying about this expectation or religious aspect, but maybe I should bring you in here. She's speaking about the connotations around black tax. And the issue around that is that it might be uncomfortable for other people. So what are your views? Is it desirable? Or maybe we should coin another phrase to describe what we're speaking about. What do you think about that?
Well, thank you for having me. I think as Khomotso has correctly indicated, this is a popular notion of referring to some kind of responsibility into one's past and history. And it is prevalent amongst black people for obvious reasons, that we grew up in abject poverty, limited resources, and struggles generally that take various shapes and forms. Unlike your white counterparts who grow up with silver spoons in their mouths and have got generational wealth that basically builds on them and kickstarts them, into a future without any historical legacy. So it has tended to take that shape and that definition as a phenomenon in broad terms. I have personally and continue to experience the so-called black tax because I grew up in a madhouse with 6 of us as siblings, struggling parents, father was a migrant worker in Johannesburg, etc. I would see him twice a year kind of thing, very limited resources. As it were. And it was my decided objective to make sure that my family comes out of that plight. And God helping, was able to get them a decent house, which I'm supporting, get them a decent vehicle, which they're utilizing, And all of those kind of issues are things that, we go through to show our indebtedness and gratitude, mainly for what the parents have done for you with the struggles, waking up and working hard and, but also I found that it is biblical to actually take care of your family and your relatives. 1 Timothy 5 verse 8, I think, deals with this aspect when it says, if you don't take care of the members of your family and your relatives, you're worse than an infidel. And essentially, that sort of brought in a cue for me to say, this is not just an issue of showing gratitude, but it is also a biblical instruction, an injunction.
I really like, well, there's an aspect that you've brought up there, and I would like to bring it to you and say, if you were maybe in a position where your parents could not afford, would you feel indebted to them to give them some sort of upkeep? I don't know, what are your views on that?
I think the Bible is filled with wisdom.
Yes.
And the author of the Bible is clued up on our human, where we fall short as humans, and the fact that many of us, entitlement without the help of Christ is who we are. It's what we bear. I've heard people say, I didn't ask to be born, So I'm really glad that I don't have biblical evidence of there being said that parents must demand.
Okay.
As the advocate rightfully says, it's about the person who gives, and the instruction is to the giving, which is great, because then it puts you as the young person in a position to be able to understand your obligation without a person saying you must, without a mother, without a father saying the Bible has told me to tell you to. And if you are God-fearing as a young person, you will understand, as the advocate quotes 1 Timothy, and even further up, I think it's verse 3, where it speaks about the widows having to be taken care of by their own, where we're in situations where some widows will have a khomotso, a mudinda at home, and they will abscond you. You will abscond your responsibility and expect others to do so for you. But the Bible is clear that, we need to take up our responsibilities as the young. I do not think it's an obligation in the sense that there should be a gun to a person's head. And this is why I'm a little uncomfortable about the term tax, because if you evade or you avoid tax, you're in trouble. So if we are...
But that's how it is, really. Your parents persecute you.
Yes.
Why did this money not come?
Yes. It's rather unfortunate that we live in spaces where that happens. I am from, I don't, as I said, haven't experienced BlackTax personally, but, with the lineage previously from my mother and her mother. We've had situations where my mother's had to take in her mother, and my grandmother had nothing but gratitude, because quite frankly, my mom didn't have to do it. So it's rather unfortunate that we're living in spaces where we have parents that are demanding and that are riding the wave that is coming from a biblical instruction that was really clear about who is obliged and who should receive.
Well, you've heard it. There seems to be some biblical imperative for us to look after those who came before us. What do you think? You can share your views with us on the hashtag TCG on SID. Let us know what you think. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Chosen Generation. We are still discussing the subject BlackTax. Don't forget to share your comment on the hashtag TCG on SID. We really love to hear from you. Now back to my guest. Let's go on with the conversation. Advocate, before you spoke about, when we were speaking in the previous section, you were talking about the fact that, historically, Black people have been disadvantaged. And I know there's a time in your life when you're in a senior position where you could make such decisions. Do you think maybe even as a form of, trying to correct the wrongs of the past, that black people should have a slightly higher percentage in their salaries so that we can also account for the fact that they also need to deal with many other unfortunate family members in their family structure?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The challenge you'd face with that is the whole notion of constitutional dispensation. And the question is whether that could be regarded as fair or unfair discrimination.
Okay.
And so it takes you into that realm. The challenge also with that is that not everyone who is black has had to go through a similar experience or situation like that, and therefore to give out a blanket instruction, or rather a regimen that seeks to cover everyone simply because they're black with the same brush may not necessarily find favor, as it were. I think it suffices that black people in the country have been, in South Africa that is, have been afforded somewhat of opportunities of advancement through affirmative action and other employment equity related requirements or obligations. However, it doesn't really guarantee them much in terms of guaranteed jobs, guaranteed opportunity, etc. They still have to fend off and fight and compete amongst themselves, sometimes amongst their counterparts, of the other races. So you wouldn't really find favor with a notion that says give a little bit more for disadvantaged individuals, unless if it is established in a work situation that their black people are actually paid less by virtue of them being black. Then in those instances, there are certain obligations to actually correct those wrongs. And the Employment Equity Act, in fact, addresses that. The employer has got an obligation to remove any discriminatory practices in the workplace. And that's the only way in which you could then address the issues of equity and trying to balance it out.
Well, there's some young person who's watching there, and when you leave the rural areas, that you say you're going to Joburg, they think you have a lot of money and you can sponsor everything. And how do I broach that conversation with my relatives back home who maybe may not understand how finances work totally? How do you say I cannot afford and fulfill the expectation that you have on me? How would you encourage some person to do that?
Well, it's a question of engagement.
Okay.
I think that it must be understood that in as much as you are trying to help to the extent that you can, you're also trying to help advance yourself, and your family. If you've got one, to reach a particular standard. It is a fact that those of us who have got these historical obligations tend to be somewhat tied, as opposed to our friends and counterparts who would not have those kind of obligations. Imagine what I would be doing with the extra bond amount I'm paying, the extra vehicle finance that I'm paying for my historical legacy, and sometimes other extras, including sometimes groceries and whatever, from time to time. If I were not exposed to those, imagine where I would be in terms of the advancement. But we don't think selfishly like that. So there needs to be an understanding and a cultivation that what you do necessarily is out of gratitude, but it's certainly not out of abundance and unlimited resources. It is struggles that we struggle, all of us, through, and to try to cut the cake. It's not an unlimited piece of cake, unfortunately, and people need to understand that. So it's an educational issue.
In your knowledge of the issue of BlackTax, how do you think this really impacts them, this burden or this challenge that they have to, be everything for everyone and themselves last. Is there perhaps some adverse impact on young people out there who have to deal with this?
Thank you for that question. I definitely think that there is, and I think it would be difficult for there not to be, depending on the amount of support that they need to provide, to their families. It's clear that the lines, as the advocate speaks about, or the lines of equity are truly, truly not the same, just in terms of our other racial counterparts, but also our other counterparts in terms of class,
Yes.
And, I've realized that because our parents really do try to, help us catch up, those that are prehistorically disadvantaged, we find ourselves in spaces where we're interacting with people that are not as don't have as many people dependent on them as we do, right? So you go to a university, you go to a school, and while you're interacting, you are harshly reminded every day of your life that you are not on the same level, that you're still playing catch up. And that can't be easy on the psyche of a lot of young people. And I think that's why we find ourselves working so hard in order to at least try to catch up. And if we don't catch up, to work towards having the generations after us at least a little closer. It can't be easy on the minds, of many of our young people. And I think that's why, there are calls, or there should be calls on our parents to be a little kinder, to be a little more thoughtful. And I think that they may have experienced whatever levels of black tax, in inverted commas, that they may have previously, for them to sympathize, with the young people that are going through this. I think the vast majority of us are not trying to forget our families. The vast majority want to assist as much as we can, and that should be factored in during conversations at home, when expectations are being voiced. There should be a factoring in that Khomozo does want to assist, and she will as far as she can. And we ask, as the advocate says, that your parents also take a bit of charge. If they cannot, let them sympathize.
Okay, that's a great place to go to a break right now. Viewers at home, what do you think about this? You can interact with us on social media. The hashtag is TCG on SID. Let us know what you think. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Chosen Generation. We are still discussing the topic BlackTax. Don't forget to share your ideas with us on the hashtag TCG on SID. Let us know what you think about the subject. Now back to my guests here. Maybe I should start with you, Advocate. How can we ensure that our offspring do not pay us black tax, if that's a way of putting it? How can we break the cycle that is happening amongst the people?
Well, I think for me, it's just ensuring that, number one, you have no expectation that because I've given birth to you, then you owe me anything in return. I give of myself. I work long hours, to make sure that my children have got decent education, they've got decent shelter, and they've got decent access to opportunity. And when I do that, it's not with a view to actually harvest anything in return. It's with a view to actually empowering them so that they are able to be independent and also compete equally with their counterparts out there, you know. As they do that, to also remember to bless others, you know, in the process, and not be greedy and self-centered. And that's part of principle we try and inculcate, you know, in them. As I do that, I'm always mindful of the fact that I shouldn't be a burden to them. And therefore, what that means is I should actually also, as I work to empower them, I must make sure that I have got sufficient to sustain myself and my wife, and so that even when I get to retirement, I'm not going to be sitting cap in hand and begging and expecting anything from my children and then curse in case they are not able or even not willing, you know, to share anything with me. So I should be self-sufficient, and I'm working hard to reach that. And I suppose the challenge to every parent is to actually try and do that. And I gave you an example about my father. He's never asked me once for R1, because he's trying to make ends meet himself on certain things. But he appreciates and applauds the support I give them in terms of him not having to be exposed to a bond installment, car installment, insurance of the car, etc. He appreciates that, bottom of his heart. But he realizes that also in the process, he shouldn't grind me to the ground, you know? And then I think this is the spirit that we should inculcate. Parents becoming self-sufficient, independent, while empowering their kids without any expectation in return.
I hear a parent listening to this saying, well, you just bought a new BMW and you seem to be doing well. Why can't you then give me? Like, I hear what you're saying, and there should be no expectation, but you seem to be doing well, and all I'm asking for is maybe 5,000 or whatever. Well, what is... Yeah, I mean, there are those expectations because they see you have a house in a city like Joburg. Is that a reasonable thing to...
It's entitlement.
Okay.
That's what it is. It's the spirit of entitlement.
How do we stop that?
I don't think we are going to stop it. I think we need to be the people to stop it, the generation to stop it. But also, as I said before the break, it's important for us to communicate efficiently that, you know, this is something that we cannot do, that we, you know, we build expectations. And I know that this is something we might not necessarily be able to go into right now, but because we would like to build, you know, this idea of who we are, it's easy for us to fall into this trap of building expectations and having people to think that we are what we are not, or we can afford what we can't, you know? If there's any person that you need to be transparent, or people that you can be transparent with, it should be your family, about your reach and your abilities, you know? And I know those parents that do that, they will use the Bible and they will use Ellen White to try and, you know, to substantiate and to make right what isn't, you know? But I think, you know, we're coming from a place here where, quite frankly, we are not encouraged to be entitled, you know? And we shouldn't be, even as children, we shouldn't have the spirit of entitlement. So I think it's within us. We are at a place now where, firstly, we break the cycle that our children don't go through it, as you say, but quite frankly, we communicate adequately with our parents about what we can, what we can't, who we are and who we are really not.
Okay, maybe I should bring you in here, advocate. This is a very heavy issue. Sometimes, because of your inability, because of the communication that you tell them, but I cannot afford this. Then there's anger at home, there are family meetings, you're even cursed. You're not gonna succeed. We're not gonna come to see your house or see your children. How do we deal with that stubbornness in some of our parents when we are honest about what we can really do for them?
Well, the easiest really answer is you give it all to God. If you know you've done your best, you've done your part, and you've been honest in doing your part, you've not cheated your way out in terms of the support that is needed. Sometimes we need to actually make a distinction between what is needed and wanted.
Okay.
Sometimes the fact that I drive a German car doesn't simply mean that you should also be having an expectation that you'll be given a German car because your son can afford it. Okay, it's not a need; it's a want. If I've been able to afford some kind of a decent vehicle to take you from point A to point B, that should be enough. You should be grateful for that. But there should never be an expectation. So the issue around meetings and the cases, etc., I mean, God says to Abraham, even if you cast, for as long as I've blessed you, that's enough. And therefore, I don't think that there should be any worrisomeness around the issue of being cast simply because people have got certain wants or demands upon you. But if you have done what is reasonably necessary to show your gratitude, to provide the support that is needed, and underline the word needed, and without having to be blackmailed into it, the Lord will bless you even if there is a mountain of curses that are held at you.
Wow, that's a great place to end the show. I would like to thank my studio guests for coming to the show. We've really enjoyed and learned so much, and perhaps those who are watching have also been blessed by your presentations today. To our viewers at home, we'd like to thank you for allowing us into your home, and we hope that you will be there with us in the following weeks to come. And perhaps maybe a final word. What we have learned today is that there definitely needs to be a balance between our obligations to God and maybe setting a few boundaries. But I think the biggest lesson is that we need to take all of these things to God, because He is the one who saves, who sanctifies and satisfies. I would like to encourage you to continue sharing your views with us on the hashtag TCG on SID. And also don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel, the SID Media. And well, I think that's it. We will see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Good.